Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Joe DiGangi. I serve as a science and technical advisor for IPEN. IPEN is a network of public interest organizations in more than 100 countries working for a toxics-free future. I'm pleased to present some information about the electronics industry in Vietnam, and in particular about the women who work there. Let's start at the end of the story with the product. Here's an example of a product. The Samsung Galaxy S8 phone emerged on the market in 2017. For example, in Barcelona, sales began in June of 2017. As you can see, this phone became very popular. However, this presentation is not about the women who use the S8, but the women who make it. Some of you might be surprised to find out that half of all the Galaxy S8 and S8 Plus phones are actually made in Vietnam. In fact, half of all of Samsung's phones are made in Vietnam. And this brings up our first question, which is what kind of electronics industry does Vietnam have? Is it big? The answer is that the electronics industry in Vietnam has surpassed the garment industry to become the #1 export industry in the country. The sales figures are significant. For example, the value of this entire pie in 2016 was $53 billion US. As you can see, Samsung is the giant in Vietnam's industry and in fact makes 2/3 of that export value at a figure of $36 billion US. Now we know the industry in Vietnam is big, makes a variety of products, and generates huge sales for companies. But who are the people that work in the industry? The answer is that most of the workers in Vietnam's electronics industry are women. In fact, women make up 80% of the workforce, and most of them are in their 20s. They come from small towns and cities all over the country to work in Samsung's factory locations. Since the industry is so large and made up mostly of women, we were surprised to find out that no one had actually asked women about their working conditions in the industry. These two colleagues from the Research Center for Gender, Family, and Environment in Development, or CGFED, which is based in Hanoi, decided to find out about the working conditions of women in Vietnam's electronics industry. CGFED is an IPEN participating organization in Vietnam and focuses on issues relating to women. They have deep experience on a variety of topics since beginning their work in Vietnam in 1993. Pham Hung Thao and Pham Thi Minh Hang both began an investigation of women workers in the electronics industry in 2016. Since Samsung is Vietnam's giant, we decided to investigate working conditions in their two largest factories, Thanh Nguyen and Bac Ninh. And you can see them here. They are located in provinces in the northern part of the country. Bac Ninh is the yellow one and close to Hanoi, and Thanh Nguyen is the red blob in the north of the country. Both of these factories have large numbers of employees. Both of them make mobile phones, and also included are display products and other types of products. This is what the Samsung Bac Ninh plant looks like from the outside. When the general public sees this view, they see an industry which looks neat and clean. They know that inside it's air-conditioned, and overall the industry is perceived to be an ideal and safe environment. According to the government, this factory and the one in Thanh Nguyen are exempt from corporate income tax for the first 4 years and pay only half the tax of domestic companies for 27 years after that. They are also exempt from import taxes on raw materials, spare parts, and components. So, Samsung and other companies have negotiated tremendous financial incentives to establish factories in Vietnam. Now that we've seen the outside, let's get some information about the inside. CGFED decided that the best way to begin to understand Vietnam's electronics industry was to conduct in-depth interviews with women workers. The study started in 2016, but began slowly because in September of that year, a 22-year-old woman died while working in the Tai Nguyen factory under circumstances that were hard to understand. This made workers nervous, but eventually 45 whistleblowers stepped forward and described their lives making mobile phones in Samsung's two largest factories. What we found raises concerns about the health and safety of these workers and compliance of the company with Vietnamese labor law. None of the women we interviewed had a copy of their work contract. That's a violation of Vietnamese law and should be addressed immediately. In the workplace, there is a meter which measures sound level. The women told us that noise levels routinely exceeded regulatory levels of 70 or 85 decibels. Occupational health studies have demonstrated that high noise levels routinely experienced by women in this study can result in psychological stress, tinnitus or ringing of the ears, and even permanent hearing loss that cannot be corrected by a hearing aid. All of the women we interviewed reported feeling dizzy or even fainting and hitting the floor at work. The reason for this is not clear. However, the women attributed this problem to lack of sleep that resulted from alternating between day and night shifts. Another serious issue was that miscarriage was identified as common. As one worker described it, "Some of us stand during work while others have to shuttle between two ends of the production line. It is not a concern for a young and single woman, but it is very difficult for a 3-month pregnant woman. As they have to stand or shuttle all day long, many have suffered a miscarriage." Another woman described it like this. She said, "It is very normal if they are young. If they are pregnant and have to keep it for the first trimester, it is very difficult. They miscarry a lot." Complaints about pains in their joints, bones, and legs were very common. This is understandable considering that the women work standing up for 8 to 12 hours a day, depending on the overtime period. Occupational health studies indicate that prolonged standing can induce musculoskeletal disorders, pooling of blood in the legs, preterm birth, spontaneous abortion, and other effects. Nearly all of the scientific literature suggests that problems associated with carrying out a job in a single position can be avoided by providing workers the time and the ability to have movement during work. One final observation was that none of the women thought that chemical exposure was a possible risk in their job. None of them thought of cleaning solutions as containing chemicals, and none of them considered the possibility of chemical exposure in a shared factory workspace. Workers said they had heard about negative effects on health, but all of them claimed that this would only happen if they worked there for a long period of time. Jobs within mobile phone factories include various positions that use paints, inks, and cleaning products, and process steps like gassing with metallic coatings, painting, laser carving, and cutting all have the potential for chemical releases. Some of you might be wondering what the company thought about these observations and findings, and we thought they would be annoyed, but as a well-resourced industry leader, they would work to address these issues. However, the reality turned out to be quite different. Before the report was released, Samsung got a copy of it and immediately threatened its workers with lawsuits and dismissal if they talked to outsiders. This was a strategic move to shut down press coverage since reporters justifiably want to talk to workers. 2 days before the report was released, Samsung sent this letter to CGFED telling both CGFED and IPEN not to publish the report and threatening CGFED with a lawsuit. One funny thing was that they denied that their own employees even worked for the company. They also claimed that our report would threaten foreign direct investment in Vietnam, which is not true and was not our intention. News about the working conditions in Samsung Vietnam emerged on the 7th of November on the leading investigative newscast in Samsung's home country of South Korea. The story reported the health impacts on women workers cited in the report, and the company strongly denied all the claims, saying that it had not received any relevant mention about unsafe working conditions from its annual on-site inspection by the Vietnamese government. On the same day the Korean news station broke the story in South Korea, CGFED colleagues met with Samsung Vietnam face-to-face in Hanoi. They met these two company representatives in a coffee shop. The main message from the company was, "Please change the report." CGFED's response was, "How can we change the testimonies of 45 women employees of the company?" You will notice in the titles of Mr. Lee and Ms. Tran that Samsung did not send people with an expertise in occupational health and safety or industrial hygiene. Instead, they apparently viewed the report and its findings as a human resources issue. The day after meeting the company, CGFED sent Samsung this letter. The letter noted that Samsung had claimed that the study had many inaccuracies, so CGFED asked them to please respond with a list of specific parts of the report that were incorrect. This was on the 8th of November, and as of this date, this well-resourced company apparently cannot find anything inaccurate because they have not responded. So the story emerged in Korean media. CGFED met the company in Vietnam. What about Vietnamese media? This was a little tricky because the Vietnamese government has still not provided permission to release the report in Vietnamese in Vietnam. Despite Samsung's best efforts to suppress the story, it emerged in the Vietnamese press at the end of November 2017. Samsung then shifted their strategy to dominating the press narrative and simply denying all of the findings. However, the report did capture the attention of the Ministry of Labor, Invalids, and Social Affairs, and that triggered a government investigation. In November 2017, the Vietnamese government investigated the two Samsung factories reported in our study. You can see that they found violations in contracts, overtime work, and inadequate training. The women we interviewed reported all three of these violations, and in this sense, the government investigation corroborates our findings. However, the government investigation was quick and had a number of gaps that you can see here. These should be comprehensively addressed to actually resolve the issues revealed in our study. Shortly after the government found workplace violations at Samsung and news stories about our study were emerging in the Vietnamese press, by a miraculous coincidence, the company became recognized through some awards as being one of the best companies for their employees. The quote here indicates that they were given these awards because they take care of the well-being of their employees. Around this same time, the report appeared on the website of the Business and Human Rights Resource Center. This is a leading NGO tracking corporate compliance with the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights adopted by the Human Rights Council in 2011. In early December, Samsung responded in writing to the posting of our study on the website of the Business and Human Rights Resource Center. Their response strongly denied the results of our study. Samsung's primary argument against the findings of their own employees was that their third-party audits showed different results. Ironically, the company said it was open to any suggestions that may help us to continuously improve our company. We made quite a few suggestions in our study, and the company response has been to threaten its workers with firing and lawsuits if they talk to outsiders, including journalists, and to threaten CGFED with lawsuits. We responded to Samsung's response on the Business and Human Rights Resource Center website. Our focus was on how the company was not complying with the UN guiding principles on business and human rights. In addition, we noted that the use of auditing firms has been an industry favorite for many years, but its results really are questionable. In fact, the Electronics Industry Association, which is now known as the Responsible Business Alliance, offered to do a gap analysis in 2016 to compare its code of conduct and audit process with the standards formulated by two civil society organizations, Good Electronics and the International Campaign on Responsible Technology. The industry association itself admitted poor scores on a whole variety of items, including things like, does the company determine the hazard potential for each material used and/or generated? One electronics industry CEO summarized the whole matter by saying that these third-party audits are absolutely toothless. In December 2017, a petition emerged on change.org calling on Samsung to protect its workers in Vietnam, Korea, and elsewhere, and address a variety of important worker safety issues. The petition grew out of a meeting held by Electronics Watch, which is an independent monitoring organization that assists public sector buyers to meet their responsibility to protect labor rights of workers in the global electronics supply chain. Pictured here is a tweet from the vice president of Tata Technologies, which is a global engineering consulting firm headquartered in Singapore. In mid-December, the petition almost had 1,000 signatories, and in mid-February, more than 100,000 people had signed the petition. We encourage you to sign it as well. In the petition and in the report, there are a series of recommendations to the company. The first is to stop threats of dismissal and lawsuits to workers because they have the right to be able to speak about their workplace conditions. We want the company to publicly withdraw lawsuit threats against public interest groups, including CGFED, and to address the issues that are raised in the study with the involvement of the women workers. The company should release a list of chemicals used in its facilities and acknowledge the importance of conducting independent health studies so that health issues can be addressed in a proactive way. So this is a story about women workers in Vietnam's electronics industry. We think that the 45 women who stepped forward are whistleblowers. Their observations deserve to be addressed and resolved. They deserve to be listened to and deserve to be heard. In many ways, the women in the electronics industry in Vietnam and in other industries are the key to the country's future. Women are the first environment for children, and they deserve to be protected. Thank you very much for your attention. I would be pleased to try to answer any questions you might have. For more information about this topic or other chemical safety issues, please visit our website. Thanks very much.